Well, we officially know where Tennessee will be going for the college football playoff, and it will be to Columbus, Ohio, to take on Ohio State. Those rankings and the 8-9 matchup remain the same as we saw last week, Brent Hubbs. And, I know some Tennessee fans are probably, bothered by the fact that, other teams ahead of them didn't have the quality wins or the resume maybe Tennessee did. But at the end of the day, Tennessee's in the playoff, and that's how you got to look at it. It's a tough road, though, for both either Tennessee or Ohio State.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things about the playoff system that in this year one that's got to be tweaked and adjust. They got to do course corrections, and one of those is on the automatic bye situation. No offense to Boise State, Arizona State. Arizona State is not worthy of having a bye. That has to get fixed. That's something the committee has to look at because it creates. Don't be the number one seed because that's not the best place for you to be. That's not the seed you want in this tournament. So those are things that you have to look at. But your point about Tennessee being in is the biggest point here, and that's what Tennessee fans should not lose sight of, whether it's a home game or a road game. Think about the wilderness you've walked through for so long. I mean, Tennessee fans have spent the last month trying to figure out not just the 12-team playoff system, but the playoffs in general, because Tennessee's not been a factor. Other than 1 week, in 2022, Tennessee's not been a factor in the playoff rankings. I mean, they've not been. They've not been discussed. They've not been on the forefront of anybody's mind. So you have to remember where you've been and how long it's taken to get back here and how slippery of a slope it is to stay at the top. And you certainly appreciate the fact that you're going to go play football again, meaningful football in December. And that's the biggest storyline today for Tennessee fans out there.
Yeah, I look at the bracket here, and we'll keep that up for just a second. I mean, the top of the bracket, you got Clemson, who while they lost to South Carolina, they've still played better football the back part of this year than they have the last year or two. Texas is, predominantly been up there. Arizona State's playing their best football. Oregon's best team, only undefeated team in the country. Tennessee and Ohio State. Then you look at the bottom of the bracket, Hubs. I mean, Georgia, I mean, were they out with Carson Beck? I mean, if he can't go, I think that they are weakened dramatically, no matter how much people wanted to prop up Gunnar Stockton last night. I mean, he looked pedestrian to me. Notre Dame, Penn State. I mean, that top side of the bracket is to me, just a much tougher road for all of those teams than anybody on the bottom.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you look at that top half of the bracket. I mean, Clemson knows how to prepare for the playoffs. They've been a perennial playoff team.
Yep.
Texas is a playoff team. They were in the playoffs a year ago. Ohio State's in that thing all the time. Oregon's been a playoff team. I mean, there's some playoff blue bloods in the top half of that bracket. You look at the bottom half of that bracket, Georgia, okay, they've been there. Penn State James Franklin hadn't beaten any top 5 teams. He doesn't have to play any, until maybe he sees Georgia or Notre Dame. SMU's, they've not been there. How did they handle that? SMU looked like they weren't ready for last night at the start of that game with the way Clemson got out of the gates. Boise State's a fun story. They've been there, but they've kind of been the tag along, if you will, as that group of 5 team. Are they good enough in all phases to go compete and beat a Penn State? Maybe. We'll see. I think Notre Dame's in a great spot in the bottom half of that bracket if Carson Beck is hurt, and it looked like he was hurt pretty significantly last night. I think Notre Dame's put themselves in a really good spot to find themselves in the playoff. I think that 7 seed with Georgia's quarterback uncertainty is not a bad place to be in that bracket.
I agree with you. You look at the Tennessee-Ohio State matchup, and, I would tell you that, Ohio State's more talented than Penn State, because those were the kind of the thought processes going in. Like, would Penn State drop down low enough to and Ohio State jump them, that would be Tennessee, Penn State. I think Tennessee's corners against Ohio State's receivers is a heck of a matchup. The way Tennessee's DBs have played all year and the talent that's at, wide receiver for Penn State, I'm not sure Tennessee had anybody that could have covered the tight end for Penn State. I mean, that guy is just a beast. So it's, to me, strength kind of versus strength here with Tennessee and Ohio State when you look at kind of what they want to do offensively and then what Tennessee does well defensively.
Well, and I thought it was an interesting comment that Kurt Herbstreit made on the television show when they were announced about, well, maybe Ohio State with a rudder had a road game because of the unrest that's taken place and fans are going to boo on the first third down and all this stuff. Was that Was that a motivation moment for Kurt
Absolutely it
Herbstreit,
was. It
or
was, yes.
I think it was, or is Ohio State really that far off, and everybody there's that much unrest and everything else at Ohio State? I don't know. I agree with you. I think that the strength versus strength. There's some things there that go into Tennessee's favor. Ohio State's a little banged up in the offensive line. The question is who handles the moment, right? Which quarterback handles the moment the right way? Can Tennessee's defense on the road, can Tennessee play on the road the way they need to in a setting? Everybody's going to talk about the cold weather and Tennessee's got to adjust to all that. And we know all those things. But I mean, you got to go out there and play. And on paper, I don't think it's a terrible matchup. I'm with you. I think there's a lot of places you'd say, boy, Ohio State's better. But I don't know that Ohio State's played up to their talent level all season long. I think Tennessee's probably come closer to playing to their ceiling than Ohio State has. Now, does the switch get flipped when we get into December here in playoff football?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, to me, I always think it's kind of hard to just flip the switch,
Agreed.
and just hope that it comes on. Maybe it does. Ohio State's got two really good tailbacks. They got a plethora of receivers. To me, the quarterback position is an interesting deal. I do think Herbstreit was challenging the Ohio State fans because I do think there is unrest there. There's absolutely unrest there. But the question is can a guy like Herbstreit carry enough weight to where the fans are like, okay, we can hate Ryan Day all we want, but we got to get behind the team and then go from there. It'll be a tough atmosphere. You're going to get them at night. The Horseshoe will be a tough place to play. And, it's what makes the new 12-team playoff neat. I mean, Tennessee would never traditionally go to the Horseshoe, even though those two teams were scheduled to do a home and home several years ago before it got canceled. That wouldn't happen. I think it's going to be neat. It would have been neat if Ohio State was coming here or Penn State was coming here or Notre Dame. That's what makes this first round so unique, the home venues.
Yeah, I agree with that. And listen, because of the way things are slotted at this point, you are getting a home game in Columbus, Ohio. You are getting a home game in Austin, Texas. Penn State. I guess if you had slotted it just 1 through 4, Penn State's got a bye. They don't play a home game. Texas would have a bye and not play a home game there if you did it that way. So you probably lose a little bit of that home game appeal with some blue bloods if you seed it 1 through 12. But I think when you look at it, the Oregon's path to the semifinals should not be harder than Texas's path to the semifinals, or Notre Dame. Well, I don't know that Notre Dame's a factor. I don't know where Georgia's at.
Penn State.
I just think you look at Penn State. I think you look at the top half of that bracket. That thing's out of whack, and they have to fix that part that is out of whack. There's some things that with seeding that has to take place. I think the other thing we have to look at too is and what Coach Saban was talking about a little bit. I don't think strength of schedule was taken into account in the first couple of weeks of the playoff rankings, and that allowed some teams to get out of whack. Okay, Texas was never penalized for their strength of schedule. They were always ranked too high. They didn't have enough quality wins against people, but they were there because they were Texas and they were a playoff team the previous year. And in the preseason, everybody said they were going to be great because they're bringing everybody back. So they're just automatically up there higher than they should be. So Texas was never going to be penalized hard enough for a loss at any point in time, unless they just absolutely gagged the game to somebody unknown. But their strength of schedule was not weighted properly at the start of things. Neither was SMU's. I think there was probably too much eye test those first couple of weeks. Oh, this week SMU played a team and maybe, Penn State had an easier game or somebody else had an easier game. And so you put SMU up really high because they look pretty on TV, but you didn't take into account their strength of schedule. I think they have to adjust the early part of the playoff rankings to get themselves in a situation where Coach Saban was talking about, because that SMU Clemson game last night probably should have been a play-in game. It should have been a true play-in game, winning you're in, winning you're out. Now, SMU, because of where they were ranked going in the game, should not have been punished and knocked out, but Coach Saban was right, in my opinion. I think they were ranked too high, and I think they had some teams ranked too high to start this. My final soapbox thing, Austin, is
look at that schedule, by the way. I mean, let me look at that. I mean, if you're Alabama right now, I mean, that's ridiculous. Right. I'm not saying SMU isn't a good team. I'm not saying they can't win a game. I'm just saying, like their body of work is a bit of a joke. I
Yeah,
mean,
they should not have been what, 8th in the rankings going into last night's game. That was too high because their strength of schedule was never properly um, analyzed, and they were ranked too high to begin with, and they got too big of a bump in a week where somebody with a good strength of schedule lost a game. Here's the other thing, and I'm done with my soapbox here. And listen, Tennessee was always going to travel. There was no chance anything
correct.
was going to happen. But everybody up there, Kurt Herbstreit, everybody talked about, I just can't get Alabama's loss to Oklahoma out of my mind. Did the Michigan loss, did Ohio State's loss to Michigan never enter your mind? I mean, because I will tell you that Ohio State's loss at home to Michigan is worse than Alabama losing at Oklahoma. Both were 3 touchdown favorites. And we're talking about Alabama's punishment because that loss, Kurt Herbstreit, I called that game. It was a beat down, and it was this. What about Ohio State? They didn't take a very hard tumble because of the Michigan loss. I think you have to be careful with your words and saying, well, that one just resonates with me, but this other team that lost at home as a 3 touchdown favorite, we'll just kind of move that one out of the way, kind of slide that one off to the side. That's the other thing that stood out to me today with some of those comments.
Yeah, and I mean, again, Notre Dame did come back and beat nobody, but they beat nobody really badly after they lost to Northern Illinois. They pummeled teams down the stretch, even though they didn't play nobody. They pummeled them.
And that's the nobody. Everybody's going to schedule nobody. I think that's the other lesson here is what's the purpose of scheduling real meaningful games, in the regular season? What's the reason for having a great non-conference game with somebody? I mean, Ward Manuel said it on his deal. It's like, hey, athletic directors, do what you think you need to do to help your program and to help your fans. What does that mean? Maybe you ought to get out of some of these games against these big time opponents if the end goal is to be in the playoff. And if you're going to keep scheduling those big time games in the regular season, then the standard you hold your coach with is a little bit different because it may cost him a playoff berth by playing that game. It nearly did Clemson.
We all say that now, but then they're going to rotate the committee off, and the new committee may come in and go, "We really want strength of schedule." There lies the problem.
No question.
Because every year it's going to be different, and you're not going to know what to do.
No question.
Can somebody really think 3-4 years in advance when it comes to scheduling? Well, we need to have a tough game. Oh, we don't need to have a tough game. Like, oh, which one is it? Like, it's going to be interesting. The first game, obviously, is Indiana Notre Dame coming up on that Friday night. That's a night game in South Bend. Tennessee gets the final game, a night game in the shoe, 8:00 ABC. It's going to be an all-day tailgate up there for Ohio State fans. But if you can get out of the gate, does that crowd turn on them? I mean, like I do think they are. I do think what Herbstreit says is accurate. I do think he was trying to talk to the Ohio State fans to get them to rally behind their team. But I do think that there's a portion of that fan base, if not a good portion of that fan base, that is ready to move on from Ryan Day and go get somebody else, whether it's Mike Vrabel or Dan Lanning or whoever.
Yeah. So can Tennessee do something? Can they get out of the gate, start fast, and play well on the road for 60 minutes? We're getting ready to find out. That's the beauty of it. And I tell you what, if you're a Tennessee fan, this is a lot better looking deal than sitting here waiting until 3:00 to find out what Florida Bowl game you're going to and trying to figure out how many guys are going to opt out of the game and not be a factor in the game.
Yeah,
look at that
Miami team. Look at that Miami team. You think Tyler Barron and Cam Ward and those guys are playing in whatever bowl game they go to?
Yeah, well, how many guys
surprise me and they'll do it, but
right. I mean, how many guys are going to opt out at Alabama and all those types of things? I mean, you'd much rather go to Columbus, Ohio, and play at night than to be going to the Florida sunshine for a New Year's Day game against a team, and neither one of them want to be there.
The big winner today for the teams that didn't make the playoff, the backup quarterbacks like a Ty Simpson or whoever the backup is at Miami, the backup anything, because there's going to be a lot of opt-outs in those bowl games that just nobody cares as much about. All attention on the CFP. Tennessee is in as the 9 seed. They will take on Ohio State, the 8 seed, that being 8:00 on the 21st, just a few days before Christmas. And then if they can find a way to win that game, then it would be off to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California to take on Oregon. Oh, Hubbard, my conspiracy series says the Rose Bowl people have already made the call, and they want that traditional Rose Bowl matchup. They don't want Tennessee being the fly in the ointment.
You get your Buffalo Wild Wings call going in right now, right?
Something like that. He's Brent Hubbs. I'm Austin Price. Follow us at Volquest.com. We'll break down the matchup. We'll have press conference reaction. Josh Heupel will get on a Zoom with media coming up here, in the next hour or so, and talk about it along with Ryan Day and Dan Lanning, that kind of like a trio of teams that could potentially play each other the first couple rounds of the CFP. He's Brent Hubbs. I'm Austin Price.